This is Mr. Oliver, and today we're addressing something that affects every relationship you'll ever have after your first one: the fertility timeline. What men and women actually need to understand before 30. Not cultural narratives, not what Instagram tells you, not what your friends are doing. Biological reality and what it means for the decisions you're making right now. This matters whether you're 25 or 45, whether you want children or you don't. Because understanding this timeline changes how you approach relationships, what you prioritize, and how you protect your future options. Let's start with what nobody wants to say directly. Biology has a timeline, and that timeline is dramatically different for men and women. For women, fertility peaks in the early to mid-20s. By 30, it begins declining. By 35, that decline accelerates. By 40, the probability of natural conception drops significantly. And by 45, natural conception becomes extremely rare. These aren't social constructs. These are biological facts that have existed for the entire history of our species. For men, the timeline is different. Male fertility declines more gradually. A healthy man can father children into his 50s, 60s, even 70s. The quality of sperm decreases with age. Risks increase. But the fertility window doesn't close the way it does for women. This creates a fundamental asymmetry in how men and women experience time pressure around family formation. And pretending that asymmetry doesn't exist doesn't make it go away. It just makes people unprepared for the consequences of their choices. Here's what this actually looks like in practice. A woman at 25 has approximately 15 years of peak fertility ahead of her. If she wants children, she has time to date, find the right partner, build a relationship, and start a family without medical intervention being necessary. A woman at 35 has significantly less time. If she wants children and isn't currently with someone she wants to have them with, she's facing a compressed timeline. Every year matters. The probability of conception decreases. The probability of complications increases. The need for medical intervention becomes more likely. A woman at 40 faces a very different reality. Natural conception is possible, but significantly less likely. IVF success rates at 40% are substantially lower than at 30%. The physical toll of pregnancy at 40 is higher. The risks to both mother and child increase. None of this is judgment. None of this is saying women over 40 are worthless or that fertility is a woman's only value. This is simply biological reality that affects family planning decisions. Now let's talk about men. A man at 25 is typically not at his peak relationship market value. He's still building his career, still developing his earning potential, still figuring out who he is. Women his age are generally more attracted to older men who have already established themselves. A man at 35, if he's spent his 20s and early 30s building himself, is often at much higher relationship market value than he was at 25. He has career stability, financial resources, life experience. He's become more attractive to women across a wider age range. This creates a dynamic where men and women are operating on different timelines with different pressures. And understanding this is critical for both genders. Here's where people make catastrophic mistakes. Women in their 20s are told to prioritize everything except family formation. Build your career first. Travel. Find yourself. Establish independence. Have fun. Don't settle down too early. You have plenty of time. Men in their 20s are told similar things. Focus on yourself. Build your value. Don't worry about relationships. Women will come later when you've established yourself. Both of these messages contain some truth, but they omit the critical biological reality. For women, delaying family formation past 30 significantly increases difficulty. For men, delaying doesn't carry the same biological cost. Let me tell you about someone I know. Brilliant woman, accomplished career, traveled the world, did everything society told her to do, met a great guy at 38. They spent 2 years dating, got married at 40, started trying for children immediately, 3 years of IVF, tens of thousands of dollars, emotional devastation, multiple miscarriages. Eventually they succeeded and have one child. But the process was brutal, and she's very clear about one thing. If she'd known at 25 what she knows now, she would have made different choices. Not abandoning her career, not giving up her goals, but prioritizing finding a partner earlier, starting the family formation process when her body was more cooperative. She didn't know the timeline was this unforgiving, until she was already past the easy window. Now let me tell you about a guy. Spent his 20s building his business, focused entirely on career, ignored relationships, got to 38, successful, ready for family, started dating, met a woman 36. They wanted children. Her fertility was already compromised. They're now 42 and 44 with no children after years of trying. He's bitter, not at her, at himself, because he could have started this process at 32 and had time. But he believed the narrative that he had unlimited time because he's male. Technically true for his biology, practically false for finding a partner whose biology cooperated. Here's what both men and women need to understand before 30. If you want biological children, that needs to be factored into your life planning from your mid-20s onward, not as the only priority, but as a real constraint that affects your decisions. For women specifically, if you want children, you need to understand that your late 20s are critical years, not for panicking, not for settling for someone wrong, but for being intentional about finding a compatible partner. Every year you delay past 30 makes the biological process harder. This doesn't mean marry the first person who shows interest. It means be strategic about who you date. Don't waste 3 years with someone you know isn't right. Don't deprioritize relationships entirely for career. Don't assume you can just flip a switch at 35 and immediately find the right person and get pregnant. For men specifically, your extended fertility timeline is real, but it doesn't mean unlimited time to start a family. Because you need a partner. And if you want a partner young enough to have a reasonable probability of easy conception, you need to find her while you're still young enough to be attractive to her. A 45-year-old man can physically father children, but his dating pool of women in their prime fertility years is limited. Most women in their 20s aren't pursuing men 20 years older. It happens, but it's not common. So assuming you can build yourself until 45 and then easily find a 28-year-old wife is unrealistic for most men. Here's the framework both genders should use. In your mid-20s, start getting serious about what you actually want. If children are part of that vision, that needs to influence your relationship decisions starting now, not in 10 years, now. For women, this means being selective but not endlessly picky. It means recognizing that the perfect partner doesn't exist and that waiting for perfection costs you time you can't get back. It means dating intentionally rather than casually if family is your goal. For men, this means building yourself but not in isolation from relationships. It means understanding that your peak years for finding a partner overlap with her peak fertility years. It means not assuming you can postpone everything until 40 and then easily find what you want. Now let's address the elephant in the room. What if you don't want children? Does any of this matter? Yes. Because even if you don't want children, the people you date might, and understanding their timeline helps you navigate those relationships honestly. If you're a man who doesn't want children, you need to be upfront about that, particularly when dating women in their 30s who might be operating under time pressure. Wasting her time when she wants children and you don't is cruel. If you're a woman who doesn't want children, you need to be equally clear, because men who do want children need to know that early so they can make informed decisions. The fertility timeline also affects relationship dynamics even when children aren't desired. Women in their late 30s dating men often feel time pressure that affects how they approach the relationship. They move faster. They want commitment sooner. This isn't manipulation. It's biological reality creating psychological pressure. Men need to understand this pressure exists and factor it into how they communicate and set expectations. Women need to understand that this pressure can make them tolerate situations they shouldn't, or push for commitment before they've properly vetted the person. Let's talk about the medical realities nobody discusses honestly. IVF is not a guaranteed solution. At 40, IVF success rates per cycle are approximately 20 to 25%. At 42, they drop to around 10 to 15%. At 44, single-digit percentages. Each cycle costs $10,000 to $15,000 typically. Most people need multiple cycles. The emotional toll is severe. Hormones, hope, disappointment, repeat. Many couples spend years and tens of thousands of dollars without success. Egg freezing is marketed as buying time, and it can help, but it's not a guarantee. Frozen eggs still need to survive thawing, fertilize, implant successfully. Success rates are lower than people assume, and the cost is substantial both for freezing and later for IVF using those eggs. None of these technologies are bad. They help many people, but they're presented to young women as insurance policies that let them delay indefinitely without consequences. That's not accurate. They're options that improve odds but don't eliminate the biological timeline. Here's what I wish someone had told me at 25. Your body has a schedule. You can work with that schedule or against it. Working with it means understanding the timeline and making decisions accordingly. Working against it means ignoring the timeline and hoping technology will compensate later. Technology might help, but hoping technology will solve a problem you created by ignoring biology is a gamble. And it's a gamble where the stakes are whether you get to have the family you want. For women reading this who are already past 30 or 35 and feeling panic, let me be clear. This is not about doom. Plenty of women have healthy children in their late 30s and early 40s. The point is not that it's impossible. The point is that it's statistically harder and requires different planning. If you're 36 and want children, you need to be extremely intentional. Date seriously. Don't waste time with people who aren't right. Consider fertility testing to understand your specific situation. Don't assume you have 5 more years to figure it out. For men reading this who spent their 20s and early 30s building themselves and now want family, understand that your fertility timeline gives you options but doesn't guarantee easy access to those options. You still need to find a compatible partner. And women in their peak fertility years have their own priorities and selection criteria. Now let's discuss the emotional aspect nobody addresses. Realizing you're past the easy fertility window creates grief. For women especially, there's a mourning process. Mourning the choices that got you here. Mourning the time you can't get back. Mourning the ease that was available before that isn't now. That grief is real and valid, but it can also cloud decision-making. Women in this situation sometimes make desperate choices, settling for partners who aren't right because time pressure overrides judgment. Pursuing medical interventions without considering whether the relationship itself is solid enough to bring a child into. Men can experience this too. Realizing at 40 that family formation is harder than expected can create its own pressure. Rushing into relationships, settling, making choices based on timeline rather than compatibility. The solution isn't to avoid the grief. It's to process it while maintaining clear decision-making. Yes, you have less time than you wish you had. No, that doesn't mean any partner will do. The goal is still finding the right person. The timeline just means you need to be more intentional and less patient with situations that clearly aren't working. Here's the brutal truth about the fertility timeline. It rewards people who plan ahead and penalizes people who ignore it. Women who start seriously looking for a life partner at 27 have more options and less pressure than women who start at 37. Men who balance self-development with relationship building in their 20s and early 30s have easier paths than men who ignore relationships until 40. This isn't fair in some abstract sense, but fairness is irrelevant. Biology doesn't care about fairness. It operates on its own schedule. You can wish that schedule was different. You can be angry about it. You can call it sexist or unfair. None of that changes the reality. What changes outcomes is making decisions based on reality rather than how you wish reality was. If you're in your 20s now, you have information that previous generations didn't have as clearly. You know the timeline. You know the statistics. You know the costs of delay. Use that information. If family is part of your vision, factor it into your planning now, not in 10 years. Now. If family isn't part of your vision, be honest about that with partners who might be operating under different assumptions. For those already past 30, you're working with the time you have left. Make it count. Be intentional. Don't waste years with people who aren't right. Don't assume technology will solve everything. Don't let time pressure override judgment, but don't ignore time pressure either. The fertility timeline is one of the most important factors affecting relationship decisions that almost nobody discusses honestly. We get cultural messages about following dreams and not settling and having it all. But we don't get honest information about biological constraints until it's often too late to use that information effectively. So here's the information. For women, fertility declines significantly after 30 and dramatically after 35. For men, fertility lasts longer, but finding a partner in her fertile years gets harder as you age. For both genders, if family is important, that needs to influence decisions in your 20s and early 30s. Not exclusively, but significantly. Plan accordingly. Make informed choices. Understand what you're trading when you delay. And don't let anyone tell you that biology doesn't matter. It matters enormously. And pretending it doesn't cost people the families they wanted.